Welcome to the 15 Minutes with a Farmer podcast from Successful Farming, where quick conversations reveal big truths about agriculture and life. I'm your host, Lisa Faust-Prater. Today, Missouri farmer Ryan Britt joins us to talk about the real-world benefits of conservation: healthier soil, more consistent yields, and a farm built to last. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me on 15 Minutes with a Farmer.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to join you.
Well, for starters, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and your family's operation?
Sure. I am a fifth-generation farmer in north central Missouri, farm with my father. We raise corn, soybeans, wheat, and then we have a cow-calf to finished beef operation.
You've served as president of the Missouri Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts, and now you're second VP on the national level. So clearly that's an important aspect of your operation. Why don't you tell us what sort of practices you're using there on the farm?
We try to make sure that everything that we do is headed that direction. And so that starts with a no-till cover crop in all of our row crops. We try to get a cover crop established just as soon as the cash crop comes off, if not interseeding into a growing cash crop. But then it goes on into conservation practices such as terraces and ponds and waterways and field buffers and a wetland and CRP. And then on our cattle side, we've been rotational grazing for a long time, kind of moving more towards adaptive management now. And then on the cattle feeding side, we've got a deep pack feeding facility, and we're currently building a deep pit feeding facility. And we have a really neat relationship with some other producers that actually are processing our beef. And so we kind of have a direct connection into some restaurants. And it's just really neat to see how one thing leads into the next, into the next.
Was there sort of a turning point, an aha moment that made you think about getting more serious about these conservation practices?
Well, honestly, it probably was when I went to college. So went to the University of Missouri and had some great opportunities to work with the USDA Ag Research Service on some other farms in the Centralia area that were doing no-till, which was really foreign to what I knew. Most of the operations in our area were full-on conventional tillage. So when I came home, Dad and I just started looking at what we were doing, and it didn't happen fast. We would get frustrated with either a weed problem that we had and how a tillage implement was handling that, and so we weren't able to get the results that we wanted. Or I think probably the biggest thing is we started testing kind of everything. Dad basically calls our farm the University North because nearly every field has some kind of a comparison or test going on it every year. And we just developed that mindset that, okay, this is what we've done for a long time. That's great if it's still the best way to do it. But if there's something else, let's try it and see. And so we started with a little bit of no-till, and it was along the same lines when we started no-tilling that I actually had an opportunity to start serving on my local conservation soil and water district board. And in that experience, started getting exposed to more conservation practices and people that had been no-tilling and had people that were already starting to use cover crops. At that time was not very popular at all. And so, I mean, these are not things that we thought of or that we were the first ones to try by any means, but it just kind of gave us confidence to try them on our scale and see how they would fit for us. And through that process, one thing led to the next. And the cover crops, I think, really made the no-till work better. And saying that, the cover crops did not work very well when we first started either. And I think the soil had to adapt to what our practices were, but I think it was mostly the management. Most of conservation practices require either more management or different management, and require a mindset of either patience or at least the open-mindedness or flexibility to do it differently and not accept the same results. And as we also were at the same time looking at fertility and had a lot of opportunities to actually test some equipment that we were using to apply the fertility, working with different companies and figure out how we could maximize those nutrients in our system. Missouri is a great state because not only do we have diversity in the products and the soils, but I mean, diversity to the extreme of every pass with a planter has multiple soil types, multiple conditions that we go through. So, one system is not going to work for everything anyway. It really requires the adaptability and the soil to have some resilience to those different conditions. And I think that is probably what was driving us the whole time. We just weren't happy with our results and we knew that we could do better. And so we kept testing and finally got more confidence and built towards the system that we have today. But it still changes every year now.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it will continue to change. And that's amazing to have that mindset of patience, which is really hard when you're just like focused on the bottom line. It's sometimes it's hard to kind of look at the long game there, but I love it that your dad was willing to sort of take this journey with you.
Dad was always trying to make it to where it's easier for me. And I think that he's instilled that into me, looking for my kids if they choose to come back to our operation. And that does not mean that they won't have to work for it, but it does mean that we're trying to make the soil have the ability to withstand, have some of the resilience to the drought and the extreme weather. We don't get the quarter inch of rain anymore. You either get half an inch or you get 4 or 5 inches, and so that soil has to be able to handle that. And we have continued to look for ways to get the results that we were looking for with less.
When someone has done cover crops, interseeding, all of these things, and you take a look at the soil and just all those different kinds of roots getting down in there, and you see there's worms and there's pathways for water, and it's fantastic when you can do something to your soil to help it retain that moisture and avoid all that runoff and just make better use of it.
We're learning that we may be able to help the soil become more resilient and be able to use what's already there by the practices that we're doing or by the cover crop that we're using to set up that cash crop, or also just by some foliars or some different biology that we can add that will help gain what's already there. And then we don't have to add as much of the salt-based fertilizers and all those things. So don't get me wrong. Don't hear, I will never tell anybody that you do not ever add fertilizer to the soil. So I will make that clear. But I will say that we may be able to help the soil be able to be more efficient in what it's doing by what we're doing with it, and to where it's not totally reliant just on what we're dumping on the soil to be able to produce that crop.
Talk to me a little bit about how you're grazing your cattle to keep your pastures healthy and sort of that symbiotic relationship with the cattle and the crops.
Yeah, so the cattle, I think, may be something that we have gone away from in the Midwest, some that we need to get back to. I think the livestock on the cash crops actually give us a lot of ability to heal the soil and to give the soil ability to produce more with less. And on our operation, we're using the cattle on the pastures, trying to get them on there in a controlled way to get them back off and have rest so that grass can come back when we need it to. We're also trying to integrate diversity in the grass. So Kentucky 31 fescue is a wonderful, easy button for grazing, and we wouldn't be able to raise cattle in Missouri without it, but we can do better. And we're trying to do better by getting some of the natives back in. We're trying to get legumes and brassicas and get forbs into our pastures. And it's pretty amazing how the cows have the ability to graze what they need to when they need to.
Tell me a little bit about the feeding facilities that you have that you've built there on the farm.
So my father and grandfather built a feedlot back in the late 60s and fed a lot of cattle there for a long time. And did it very successfully. And they we're very careful with what ran off of that by using grass and filter strips below it. But they would be the first to tell you that it did not make great use of that manure. And so Dad and I built a bed pack feeding facility 12 years ago now. We can actually wean directly into that barn, or we can grow them on grass for a while and then put them into that barn, depending on the season and what the forage availability is and all the other variables that go into that. We'll add bedding 2 or 3 times a week. We'll scrape a feeding alley and just collect that. So it's a zero discharge facility. Where the cattle are laying or where the pen area, that actually builds up and it can compost in that barn until we'll clean out that barn once or twice a year. And that is a great system for starting cattle in the spring when we get muddy, and in the summer with our heat. It's pretty hard to feed cattle.
Yeah.
And so getting them under that roof, we get a more consistent environment for the cattle, so they're able to eat and turn that into pounds of beef more efficiently. And then we're also able to maximize the nutrients that are coming out of them and be able to put that back on the crop in a controlled fashion where we can put it where we need it, when we need it. And so that's been a good system for a while. Well, first off, we're outgrowing it, which is a good problem. But then also the worst thing about that deep pack facility is it does require quite a bit of labor and some machinery and a lot of bedding. And so now we are building a deep pit facility. So it'll be a slatted barn and it'll have rubber over top the slats. We'll capture all the nutrients coming out of those cattle. And then we're going to have a couple different options with those nutrients that are stored in that deep pit. And we'll be able to spread that directly on the farm, on the fields, through pumping like it's been done, in dairies and hogs. Sure, yeah. and a lot of other operations. But we're also looking at 2 technologies that we have not got any experience with. And number one would be irrigating some of the row crop ground and incorporating that manure directly into that irrigation system. Mm-hmm. And that excites me a lot because that's something that we want to do anyway. But then also we may look at separating the liquids and the dry out of that pit and being able to use that liquid just as a fertilizer.
Yeah. I love it that you mentioned how it's sort of similar to how things work on a dairy. I think beef producers could learn something from those dairy farmers and the way that they're handling, the nutrients. And you really can pick some stuff up there that you can take back to the farm,
Well, technology is a wonderful thing, and YouTube University is something that a lot of us have learned so much from. And as you said, the dairy industry has been doing this for a long time, very successfully. And the difference between dairy and beef, in my opinion, is those guys are a lot tougher than I am. I just think that there's so many lessons that we can learn, and I appreciate that we've been able to see so many great content providers that give us the confidence to try these things on our operations.
Talk to me a little bit about your yields and how you've seen them affected by the conservation practices.
Honestly, they're a lot more uniform across our fields. Instead of seeing the extreme high yield, but then extreme holes that we would have in fields before, with the conservation practices, we've been able to level that out quite a bit. And we see much more consistency. Now, I'll be quick to tell you that we do not always have the top yield in the area, and we're not going to. But I think that when we look at return on investment, which is how I get paid, I think that we're pretty competitive. And a lot of times we don't have as much cost in an acre as somebody else might. And so we're trying to find that balance. I hope that we are actually more productive as far as return on investment than maybe just looking at total bushels.
Really, it is the ROI. That's what's important. That's your bottom line right there. So it's good that you're focused on that.
I appreciate you saying that, but I'm still just a prideful farmer that I get in the combine and I get frustrated because I hear talk of some neighbor that's got this huge top end yield, and I have to call my agronomist and he has to remind me, let's look at the total cost on what they've got to get there. And year in and year out, you tell me who has more money at the end of the year. I have to consider not only what the total dollars of income were for the year, but also how we've set the soil up for producing next year and the year after that and 30 years from now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I really just appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. And I am wishing you just a safe and bountiful harvest and MIZ.
Well, at ZOU, absolutely. But I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and take that story out to everyone else. And you do important work, and thank you for doing that.
Oh, well, thank you. It's my pleasure. I have the best job in the world. I just get to talk to farmers all day, so I love it.